to me, and I didn't believe them. They didn't get any further. Didn't get any further than me anyway. So there's that. Also, too, now if you read this complaint, I will put it in the member section. If you read the complaint, you'll see that it's the typical story. 14-year-old kid was lured in by another 14, 15, 16-year-old kid, like Amway. They would get girls, uplink, download it, and brought to the Palm Beach mansion. Nothing about in his complaint about Orgy Island or Pedophile Island or Lolita Express. No, very simple. They got the kid at a high school. They brought him over to Palm Beach Mansion. That's where the kid got molested. Okay? ... And that's what all these cases are. There's nothing in there about basements on the island, we're breeding children for adrenochrome factories and all this kind of crazy stuff. This is the legit, real work that's going on in this case that people don't need to come up with these hysterical stories and these crazy videos and all this other wild, hysterical stuff. Okay? Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about adrenochrome, if you Google Epstein adrenochrome, you'll see all this stuff. There's this hoax, this myth out there that what these people do is, or that what Epstein was doing, in the elite, is that they use a drug called adrenochrome, which was first made popular in the movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, the version starring Johnny Depp. And the theory is that you have to take small children and create fear in them, trauma and fear, and this stimulates their adrenal gland, and then they take that and they squeeze it out, I guess, or whatever, and they process it, and they make this drug called adrenochrome. And this is what the elite and the rich take, and they're addicted to this drug, and that's why they're doing all this activity. There's no evidence to this whatsoever. And I challenge you to find me a lawsuit, anything, a case, an arrest of the production of adrenochrome, right? Because it's just not out there. There is not over the counter, but there is a chemical called adrenochrome, which is if you take epinephrine, epidrine, which is adrenaline. When you used to watch what was that show, the ER with George Clooney, and they'd say get the epi, 2 grams of epi, and they pop him with that epi, and it brings the guy back to life. That's adrenaline, right? So this is the epidrine. They oxify it, and it's adrenochrome, and it comes up, and it says it causes psychosis and paranoia, all kind of stuff too. So it's a theory that the rich and the elite are addicted to this chemical, and they can only get it. By the way, I don't know why they couldn't get the epi. That stuff's out there all over the place, although you don't see it sold on the black market that I could see, that I could tell. I had 2 cases in the past month. I got 2 people getting, as a matter of fact, what's today's date? I got 2 people being sentenced on drug charges. Okay, the one guy had GHB, another guy producing meth, and these guys never heard of adrenochrome, never heard of it. Worked on the Pizza Connection, big heroin smuggling case. The adrenochrome never came up in that. He got an Epstein lawsuit. Adrenochrome doesn't come up in that. But it comes up on YouTube, and it comes up in these hysterical reports you see out there on Twitter, and these characters in 4chan and all that kind of stuff. Now, a couple of names you see attached to this adrenochrome. One is Charlie Sheen. And you may not realize this, but I was involved. I was the investigator in the lawsuit that Charlie Sheen sued against my client, Capri Anderson. Okay? We know people who lived at Charlie Sheen's house. Okay? People who lived at Charlie Sheen's house later on went to live at my client's house. A different client. So we're very familiar with what's going on with Charlie Sheen. Personally, I am familiar with some of the most intimate details of Charlie Sheen's life. A lot of people know what I'm talking about. Read between the lines. But I have this information. And there's no adrenochrome comes up in this. So a lot of people who are thinking, here's the classic character, Charlie Sheen, who would be, obviously the guy's out there using drugs. We know what drugs he was using. We know what kind of... And by the way, too, I'm not saying he's innocent of any kind of sex with underage people. There is some very credible documentation. His ex-wife, Denise Richards, wrote a letter to Child Protective Services saying, hey, I can no longer be custody and guardian for these two boys because they are showing clear signs of being abused. Okay? He's never been convicted of abuse. He's never been arrested for it or anything like that. But his ex-wife says clear signs, who is taking care of his kids, and we're not her biological kids. And she went out of her way to care for these kids. And she says, I can't have these kids in my home. She also made allegations of child porn on his cell phone, his computer, stuff like that. And in court, sworn documents in court. So there's all that. I'm not saying Charlie Sheen's a good guy like people like Alex Jones say he's a good guy. Okay? I'm not that guy. All right? What I'm saying is there's no evidence that he's ever used a drug called adrenochrome, okay, which is really a mythical drug that started in a movie and a book called Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Now, the source of that book is Hunter S. Thompson, who has his own allegations against him. But what would motivate him to expose this drug to people and tell them that's the big, big top secret the elites are using? Just not out there. Doesn't exist. Another one, people saying if you Google it, Google adrenochrome, Johnny Depp. Oh, look at him. He's showing signs of adrenochrome withdrawal. They're not only are there experts on YouTube and Twitter and 4chan of what adrenochrome is and who's using it and how they make it just out of their cold cloth, out of their head, but they also know what the withdrawals signs look like. Well, okay. We just did a show here recently. We had a guest on our show. And Johnny Depp's attorney listened to the show, and he made some statements disparaging my guest, and because my guest worked as a private investigator in the lawsuit. What's her name? Is Heard, against Johnny Depp there. So he's very familiar. This guy went looking for dirt on Johnny Depp. I know the dirt that he found. Not the work product for the lawsuit, but I'm familiar with the work he did. Anyway, and again, we're aware of the drugs being used, but no, not aware of anything about adrenochrome. Again, it's not out there. So it seems like the further away you get from the reality and the people involved in these stories, that's where you start to hear these hysterical things, that are just taken as fact by people on the internet, these chat rooms and these message boards and stuff like that. But the further away you get, the less real it is. I've been played some repeats in the past couple of weeks of Abe and Ella, the Hempstead couple, who made these wild accusations years ago about the Papa eats babies. They put their children on, his stepchildren, her children. He was just a boyfriend. And I had him on my show, and I looked into this case, and I was disturbed by some things they were saying, by their attitude. They wanted to talk about marijuana and how that cures things or whatever, and you got your kids, you lost custody of your kids. At the time, I was fighting for custody of my kids, so I was very sympathetic with them. I tried to help them, but they didn't seem too concerned about that. And then he confessed to me on the air about hitting these children in the head with a metal spoon, and I says, well, you've been in jail, you've been in prison, you're a knock-around kind of guy. You can't handle these little kids. He goes, no, I was in fear of these kids. So it didn't seem like they had the kids' best interests at heart. And then we had some experiences with them off the air. And I reported all that to you, and you can just listen to that and make your own conclusions, without this hysteria, and stalking and harassment and going by the people who are consumed and obsessed with that case. So there's that as well. Now, I tell you about these things, because I believe I'm an advocate for victims, okay, especially in this area. There's a congressional hearings going on right now. You don't see much about it, but it's about the abuses that go on in these